Hello, YouTube fans. This is Dr. Matthew Johnson. It is Tuesday afternoon, February 27th, 2018, 1:25 p.m. And I am here in my private practice office and wanting to talk with you about developing the sensitivities of the subtleness of the Sasquatches, or otherwise known as the Janu, the Bigfoot forest people. They have unique paranormal abilities, and all too often and all too quickly, the old schoolers and trolls and moles will try to shout out diagnoses that they have no clue what they really are. They'll say they're schizophrenic, they're psychotic, blah, 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 blah. And they don't have mental health training. They don't have degrees. They don't practice professionally like yours truly does. And in case you haven't listened to other videos in the past, I've had some of those trolls a couple of years ago go after my license by making false and bogus complaints to the licensing boards about how I'm psychotic, using drugs, etc., because I talk about the paranormal abilities of the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu. And so they're saying I'm schizophrenic, I'm psychotic. The board's response was, no, he's not. He's fine, and we don't regulate the hobbies of our psychologist, and Dr. Johnson's done absolutely nothing to harm the patients who sit on his couch. So go away. Now, for those of you who aren't very familiar with mental health, the mental health field, this is the DSM-IV, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. And this is the Bible of the mental health field that psychologists, psychiatrists, and all kinds of counselors use. And in a nutshell, schizophrenia is identified by a number of symptoms that contribute to the diagnosis, such as inappropriate affect, laughing in the absence of stimuli. In other words, they're just, "Wah!" but like there's nothing to laugh at. Why are you laughing? Or a disturbed sleep pattern, dysphoric mood, which can be depression, anxiety, anger, anxiety and phobias, depersonalization, detachment from others and self, derealization, feeling that the surroundings aren't real, cognitive deficits impacting language, processing, executive function, or memory, lack of insight into the disorder, meaning they don't know they have it, right? Because you see the real chronic, obvious schizophrenic people out there just kind of talking to themselves and hearing voices, and they don't even know they got a problem. They're just that way, right? And you see people like that in airports with the little cell phone thing on their ear, and they're talking. You go, ooh, is that person schizophrenic? Oh no, they have an earpiece. So, there's this thing called differential diagnosis. You got to look at all the data and tease it out. Social deficits, and again, hostility and aggression. And then in order for schizophrenia to be involved or be the diagnosis, you can't have somebody being psychotic while they're on drugs, or when they've drank too much, or they have a major depressive disorder going on which causes depression, or which can cause psychoses, and they can't have a bipolar disorder going on. The bipolar, here's a pole, and bi means two ends of the pole, so they're down in depression and they're up in mania, lots of energy, going crazy, bouncing off the walls. So bipolar means two ends of the poles, down in depression, up in mania, down in depression, up in mania. And then they also can't have a schizoaffective disorder, which is similar to schizophrenia, but it includes a major mood disorder. So the bottom line is, unless you're a trained professional and you have years of experience talking with people on the couch, maybe you ought not to be shouting out those diagnoses. Maybe, just maybe, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Okay, so maybe me being in the field for 36 years, maybe I might know what I'm talking about. So now we move on to the developing our sensitivities to the subtleness of the Sasquatches, the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu. For throughout human history, the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu, have been recognized in various cultures around the planet. And you can see them in the artwork, they're in the mythologies, and they have tried to make contact with us, and they have. In many ways, they actually have made contact with us. But 50 years ago, they went out of their way with the Patterson-Gimlin film to intentionally have Patty shot on film. And you notice she just walked away up the middle of that river. She could have ran to her left to the bushes and up the hillside with the trees. She could have cloaked, one of the paranormal abilities. She could have attacked, which they don't do, but people go, oh yes they do. No, not the Janu. Tracon do, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, she walked straight up the riverbed, giving them ample time to film and film and film and film and film. And then that got the whole ball rolling with all of us going out to the woods being curious and them showing themselves to many people, and ultimately, excuse me, wanting us to eventually come across portals and help them with the Exodus. Well, that eventually happened, Scroll down and watch my 4-part series of The Great Reveal. It's going to take you about 4 hours to watch it all, but your mind's going to be blown. Or buy my Bigfoot book and read that. And actually, if you do both, that's even better. Then you'll really understand what's going on. So anyway, the Exodus occurred. Mystery solved. Mission accomplished. No need to continue with the trying to prove they exist thing. That's not where they're at anymore. They're now wanting to interact with us. They're wanting to interact with the human race, one person at a time. And if you have a good heart, and you're a kind person, and you have an open mind, and you reach out to them, they'll reach back to you. It's that simple. But you do have to be a kind person. You do have to have a good heart, and you do have to have an open mind. So if you lack in any one of those areas, you could be a kind person with a good heart. But if you don't have an open mind, they're not going to interact with you. So, and if you're an a-hole, meaning you're not a kind person, they're not going to interact with you. So that's an important criteria. Kind person, good heart, open mind. Reaching out to them, they reach back. So they are now focusing on wanting us to become more sensitive to the subtleness of the Sasquatches, of the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu, meaning to interact with them in their true form. And in their true form, they are beings of light, they're orbs, and they can shapeshift into physical form, so they're not one or the other. They're not beings of light or flesh and blood. They're actually both. They're beings of light, and they can transform, shapeshift into flesh and blood. So they're both and, not either or. They're both and. Both beings of light and flesh and blood. So, with that said, as you get to know them, as you become more sensitive to the subtleties of the Sasquatches, the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu. You're going to be able to develop mind speak, which is kind of a telepathy with them. You're going to see their shimmering images. They may move in and conduct medical scans and try to heal you. And numerous people that have come to Soya, and now our home on the mountaintop 15 miles outside of Chehalis have experienced healings. That's not me making crap up. That's stuff that's actually happened and people are testifying to. So we're either all crazy, we're either all lying, or we're all telling the truth. And we're not crazy and we're not lying, so that only leaves one other option: we're telling the truth. And if you can't handle the truth, that's your issue, not ours. So something about the mental health disorders that you need to know, like schizophrenia, is if more than one person is seeing something or hearing something or experiencing something, guess what? That's not a psychosis. It's not a psychosis. Okay, that's a group of people seeing the same thing, hearing the same thing, experiencing the same thing. That is not psychosis. And it's not an automatic psychosis because somebody is engaging in mind speak or seeing something, etc. Like the trolls tried to allege when they made the false bogus complaint to the board a few years back. That doesn't meet the criteria, but they're clueless because they're not trained and they don't know any better. And they never experience the stuff themselves, which they go, well, I never experienced it, so it can't be real. Well, you don't meet the criteria. You're not a kind person with a good heart. You're a troll. You're mean-spirited. You're an a-hole. They don't want to interact with you. That's why you haven't experienced it. But those who have, just because they've experienced mind speak, have seen things, etc., that others they're experiencing with them, doesn't mean they're psychotic, they're schizophrenic, or even have a schizoaffective disorder. It just means that they're becoming more skilled and more trained in being sensitive to the subtleness of the Sasquatches, the Bigfoot forest people. With that said, I have a story to share. Years ago, when I was in private practice in Fairbanks, Alaska, I had a adolescent who was brought to my office at the age of 17 by their parents. And this adolescent was a skilled and gifted artist. And I mean, very talented at the professional level. But every time this adolescent sketched something, painted something, just like, the Where's Waldo pictures, there was always, if you looked close enough, a shadow person in the artwork. And, keep in mind, this is back in the 90s. This was before my family's encounter on July 1st, 2000, and I knew nothing about the Bigfoot forest people, let alone their paranormal abilities, etc. So this individual had this going on since age 12, was diagnosed with schizophrenia at age 13 and placed on antipsychotic medication. And for 4 years was taking this antipsychotic medication, and it wasn't working. This person was still seeing shadow people and painting these shadow people into their pictures. So I decided to do something unorthodox, and I asked the parents if I could, do a home visit. And they said, sure. When do you want to do that? And I said, well, I want to do that when you guys are at work and the kids are at school. Do you trust me? And they said, oh yeah, we trust you. So they gave me directions and told me I didn't need a key because their front doors never locked. And then I drove about an hour outside of Fairbanks and parked my vehicle where they said to park it alongside the road, walked down this trail through the woods, got to the edge of this river, grabbed the rowboat, rowed across the river, tied the boat up to a tree, hiked through this trail for about 2 miles through the woods, and came out into this meadow with this beautiful, huge log home, kind of a Better Homes and Garden log cabin, and studying flowers and everything. It was gorgeous, and I went through the front door. It wasn't locked, and climbed up the rickety ladder to the loft bedroom, and saw that this adolescent had all kinds of posters on the wall that were demonic, and Friday the 13th and slashers and just real dark, negative stuff. And then looked at the reading materials on the bookshelf and saw likewise it was full of similar material, and then looked at the music and same thing. Then I climbed down the ladder, walked out the front door, closed it behind me, walked 2 miles through the woods, and when I was walking through the woods, I was beginning to see shadow people. And got back to the boat, rowed across the river, tied the boat up on the bank, got in my vehicle and drove back to Fairbanks. A couple days later, the family came into my office, and they asked, "So, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, the posters need to come off the wall. The music CDs need to get trashed. The books need to go bye-bye, and your adolescent child needs to quit putting garbage in, because garbage in, garbage out. And also, Dad, you have let your child go through the woods for years and years on the way to school without any escort from you. We're talking most of the school year. It's dark during the winter. And although the snow lights things up, your child is walking through 2 miles of woods each way every day without a flashlight and without an armed escort. And there are grizzly bear that might not be hibernating or come out of a hibernation. You don't know what other wildlife's out here, or people, or whatever. And so they took her off her medication. They got rid of the crap in the bedroom, garbage in, garbage out. And Dad started escorting her, the child, and things got better. In other words, there wasn't schizophrenia involved. And sometimes, unless we go above and beyond the call of duty to try to engage in differential diagnosis and tease out the data, we're not really going to know what's really going on with that person if we just automatically label everything that seems different as being schizophrenic, psychotic, schizoaffective disorder, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot more to it. Now, getting back to developing our sensitivities to the subtleness of the Sasquatches, the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu. Again, when you have one or more people seeing the same thing, the same shimmering image, the same orbs, the same glowing lights, the same eye glow, hearing the same vocals, the wood knocks, or tree pops, etc., 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 that is not a psychosis. That is not a hallucination. That is not schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, psychotic break, etc. It is the real deal. And the Bigfoot forest people, the Janu, are trying to shift, trying to use people like myself and others to educate everyone else that they're trying to shift their focus from presenting themselves in physical, upright, hairy, bipedal, human-like being to who they really are, which is, again, beings of light, orbs, who can manifest themselves in a variety of ways. And so I just want to let you know that if you are out there and you are hearing them and you are seeing them, and especially if you're sharing this with other people, the experiences with other people, and they're hearing and seeing them too, feeling their presence, etc., you're not psychotic, you're not schizophrenic. But you have a lot to learn. And, there always is the possibility of having somebody who might be schizophrenic but still interacting with the Bigfoot force people, the Sasquatches, the Janu. So I'm aware of a former client who is in that scenario, and actually a present client who is also in that scenario, where the individual is definitely schizophrenic, on medications stabilizing their symptoms of schizophrenia, but yet at the same time they're also experiencing the force people on their property with other family members, footprints, visuals, the screams from the forest, the wood knocks. So in those rare situations, you can actually have somebody who is schizophrenic, but also interacting with the forest people. So anyway, just trying to provide a little bit of education, trying to help you engage in some differential diagnosis, also trying to help most of you understand that the field is changing. The Bigfoot forest people, the Janu, are moving us, all of us, in the direction of trying to develop our sensitivities to the subtleness of the Sasquatches and in their real form. They're shifting away from the upright, hairy, bipedal humanoid figures. It's not that they won't be showing themselves in that way, it's just that they'll be doing it less and less as we shift over. And why? Well, because they want to be accepted for who they are, that's why. And again, if you're a kind person with a good heart and an open mind, and you reach out to them, they'll reach back to you. And their goal is to help change humanity one person at a time, and help us to reconnect with God, with our neighbor, with ourselves, and with the planet we live on. And yes, they view themselves as our brothers and sisters, as fellow creations of God. And they don't view themselves as a deity. They don't want to be worshipped as a deity. They want that to be clear. And just so you know, I don't want to be your guru. I'm just, I guess, a chosen ambassador on their behalf to help provide an education. But I'm not your guru, and this isn't a religion. It's just sharing facts. They're co-creations of God and pointing us all back in that direction of reconnecting with God, with our neighbor, with ourselves, and with the planet God has provided us with. And so there you have it. I'll probably provide this education again in another video. And Cynthia wanted me to tell all of you that I have a full-time job. It's right here, okay? Private practice, 5 days a week, pretty much 9 to 5. She has a full-time job. She works for a large law enforcement agency 5 days a week. So this whole Bigfoot thing, okay, it's not our job. We don't make money off of it. It's our hobby. And watch the 4-part series of The Great Reveal. Read my book, and you'll understand that I'm not in this to make money. So the whole Bigfoot thing is not my job. This is my job. This is where I make my money. And I'm the trained professional, and I know the difference between what a mental health disorder is and what interacting with the Bigfoot force people, Janu, involves. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something. This is Dr. J signing off.